What if I told you that one of the fastest conquests in history, an empire that swept across continents in just a few years, was first stopped, not by a mighty kingdom, but by a handful of rebels hidden inside a cave? This is the forgotten story of how a broken kingdom survivor lit the spark of resistance that burned for 700 years. In the early 7th century, the map of the known world was being redrawn. In Arabia, a desert land of scattered tribes and ancient trade routes, something extraordinary had taken root: Islam. In only a generation, this new faith had not only unified the once feuding Arab clans, but also unleashed a wave of military and spiritual expansion unprecedented in history. Within decades, the armies of the Caliphate swept aside the two great powers of the age, the Byzantines in the east and the Sassanids of Persia. Where once stood mighty empires that had endured for centuries, now the banners of Islam fluttered. From the sands of Arabia to the lush valleys of the Nile, from the mountains of Persia to the Mediterranean coastlines, the Caliphate's dominion grew with unstoppable momentum, and by the dawn of the 8th century, the wave pressed westward, to the very edge of the world as it was then known, the Iberian Peninsula. But as history would prove, even the mightiest tides can break against the smallest of stones. By the year 711, Iberia, once a jewel of Rome, was under the rule of the Visigoths. These Germanic warriors had carved out their kingdom in the ruins of empire, adopting many Roman customs, but never fully uniting their land. The Visigothic kingdom was fragile, torn apart by bitter rivalries among the nobility. When King Roderick seized the throne, he did so not with the loyalty of all, but with the bitter hatred of rivals. His kingdom was divided, his throne unstable, and his enemies plentiful. Meanwhile, across the narrow Strait of Gibraltar, only a few miles of water separated Iberia from North Africa, and from the growing might of the Umayyad Caliphate. There, Musa ibn Nusayr governed with authority, commanding armies hardened by campaigns across deserts and mountains. To test Iberia, he dispatched one of his most trusted commanders, a Berber general named Tariq ibn Ziyad. With him came 7,000 cavalry, many of them recent converts to Islam, men of the mountains and deserts, fierce fighters wielding light spears, curved swords, and mounted on agile horses perfectly suited to the rough Iberian terrain. Legend says that when Tariq's army landed, he made a bold gesture that would echo through history. Ordering his ships burned, he turned to his soldiers and declared, "Behind you is the sea, before you is the enemy. There is no escape but in victory." In that moment, he left his men with no retreat, no second thought, only the certainty of conquest or death. When word of the invasion reached King Roderick, he was far to the north, already embroiled in suppressing yet another rebellion. Forced to march his forces south with haste, he gathered an army perhaps 25,000 to 30,000 strong, nearly triple the numbers of Tariq's invaders. It should have been enough to crush the Berber general and drive him into the sea, but numbers alone do not decide battles. Tariq, sensing the weight of Roderick's host, called for reinforcements. His commander, Musa ibn Nusayr, answered, sending 5,000 more men. Even so, the Muslim army numbered only about 12,000. In July of 711, near the banks of the Guadalete River, the two armies met. The Visigothic host stood grand, its warriors proud, its king resplendent. But beneath the surface, loyalties were fractured. As the battle raged, whispers of betrayal became reality. Some Visigothic nobles, still loyal to Roderick's rivals, abandoned the field. Confusion spread like a spark in dry grass. The chain of command crumbled, and as faith faltered, the tide of war shifted. Tariq's seasoned fighters pressed the attack with unity and conviction. In the chaos, Roderick himself was cut down. His body was never recovered. In a single day, the Visigothic kingdom, centuries old, was decapitated, its throne empty, its army shattered, its king lost. The gates of Iberia stood wide open. In the aftermath of Guadalete, resistance collapsed like a house built on sand. With no central authority left to rally the people, Tariq and his men advanced with astonishing speed. City after city fell. Écija surrendered. Córdoba was seized. The eastern ports were secured. Tariq himself marched into Toledo, the Visigothic capital, and claimed its treasures. What had begun as a raid now became a conquest. The following year, Musa ibn Nusair himself crossed into Iberia, bringing with him 18,000 more men, veterans of earlier campaigns in Africa. Side by side, the two commanders led their armies deeper into the peninsula. Merida, Seville, Zaragoza, each fell before the might of the Caliphate. Some towns bargained for their lives and were spared, their people allowed to remain under new rulers in exchange for tribute. Others resisted and were taken by force, their walls broken, their people subdued. By 714, in the space of only a few years, most of Iberia had fallen. The Umayyad banners stretched from coast to coast. So great was the momentum that the armies even crossed the towering Pyrenees, pushing into southern France. But their ambitions alarmed the Caliph in faraway Damascus, who recalled his generals before they could carve kingdoms of their own. Still, the message was clear. Iberia had been transformed. A new land had been born. Al-Andalus. Under the rule of Damascus, Al-Andalus became a province of the Umayyad Caliphate. Governors were appointed to maintain order, collect taxes, and enforce Islamic law. Yet, unlike other conquerors of the past, the Umayyads employed a pragmatic system. Christians and Jews, the people of the book, were allowed to govern their own communities under their own laws, provided they paid tribute. Many accepted this arrangement, preferring stability to the chaos that had consumed the Visigothic kingdom. But not all Iberia lay subdued. Far in the north, beyond the Cantabrian mountains, small Christian enclaves endured. Rugged terrain and poor infrastructure had long isolated these regions. Roman roads had never penetrated deeply into the mountains, and now this absence worked against the conquerors. The Muslim armies raided the north, but found little success in holding it. The mountains that had resisted Rome now resisted the Caliphate. In those high valleys, a new story was about to begin, one that would echo far longer than any thought possible. From the shadow of defeat emerged a man of uncertain origins, but of undeniable determination. His name was Pelayo, or Pelagius. Some say he was of noble Visigothic blood, perhaps even kin to the fallen King Roderick. Whatever his lineage, his deeds would define him more than his birth. Gathering a small band of warriors, Pelayo began to strike at Muslim garrisons. His raids were swift, his men vanishing into the misty passes after every attack. He became a symbol, drawing Christian refugees to his banner. Men and women unwilling to submit, seeking a leader who dared to resist. In the mountains of Asturias, Pelayo carved out not a kingdom yet, but a refuge, a place where defiance could breathe. His warband was small compared to the might of Al-Andalus, but they knew the land, the gorges, the caves, the rivers, and in those natural fortresses, a new hope flickered. By the year 718, or perhaps 722, Pelayo's defiance could no longer be ignored. The Umayyad governor ordered a campaign into the mountains. Al-Qama, a trusted commander, was sent with a force perhaps numbering 800 to 1,000 men, though Muslim accounts suggest far more. He was supported by Munuza, the wali of the north. Confident, they believed crushing Pelayo would be a mere formality. Pelayo, however, chose not to meet them in the open plains. Instead, he drew them into the mountains, to a valley near Covadonga. There, steep cliffs rose like walls, forests thick with shadow closed in, and a narrow approach turned the land into a natural trap. Legend says Pelayo and his men took position in a cave, La Cueva de Covadonga, and along the slopes above. From there, they could rain arrows, spears, and stones upon any force below. When Al-Qama sent envoys demanding surrender, Pelayo answered with words that would echo through the centuries. "We will live here as free men, and we will die here as free men." The Umayyad forces advanced into the valley, their formation narrowed by the land. Cavalry, the pride of their army, became nearly useless. When the vanguard reached the kill zone, Pelayo gave the signal. Suddenly, the sky seemed to fall. Arrows hissed, javelins flew, rocks crashed down. From above came war cries amplified by the valley walls, turning hundreds of voices into the roar of thousands. Panic spread. Soldiers struggled to raise shields, but discipline faltered. As confusion mounted, Pelayo's men charged. Down the slopes they surged, few in number but fierce in spirit. The valley became a slaughterhouse. Retreating soldiers crashed into those still advancing. Chaos swallowed order. In the melee, Al-Qama was struck down. Leaderless, the Umayyad troops broke and fled, harried every step by the mountain warriors. Many perished in the gorge. Others scattered, never to regroup. Muslim chroniclers would dismiss Covadonga as a minor skirmish, hardly worth mention. Christian accounts would exalt it as a miracle, the first sign that God had not abandoned Iberia. Legends grew, tales that the Virgin Mary herself appeared in Pelayo's cave, promising victory. But what matters most is not myth, but consequence. Pelayo's name spread. More refugees flocked to him until his leadership became undeniable. Soon he was crowned King of Asturias, the founder of the first Christian kingdom of what would become known as the Reconquista. The war for Iberia would not end quickly. It would stretch across nearly 8 centuries, marked by victories, defeats, alliances, betrayals, and rivers of blood. But it had begun, and it began not in a grand capital, nor upon a vast battlefield, but in a narrow mountain valley where a small band of fighters chose freedom over surrender. In only a few years, the Caliphate's armies had swept across Iberia in one of the fastest conquests in history. But in Covadonga, in a place hidden by cliffs and forests, the tide of resistance was born. The Reconquista, the long struggle that would last until 1492, began with Pelayo, with his cave, with his mountain fighters. It began with the will of a few who refused to bow. And so history turned, not on the clash of vast empires, but on the courage of a small band whose defiance lit a fire that would burn for generations.
Please subscribe and look for more documentaries at Swords and Shadows.